We're glad you're able to join us this morning, Sunday, the 5th of March. And we are carrying on with a series looking at Abraham's life. And last week we looked at Genesis chapter 18, how Abraham interceded before God, how God asked himself this question: shall I show Abraham what I am about to do? And where God was really debating within himself, thinking, is it wise? Shall I really show Abraham what I wanted to do? And in the end, he concluded that, well, Abraham actually has chosen to follow me. He is a man who has chosen my ways. He is a man who has chosen not just for himself, but even for his family and for his descendants after him, that they should follow me and that they should be separate from the world. And because of that, God said, I will bring upon Abraham all that I have promised concerning him, and I will make him a great nation. And because of that, he saw it right and fitting to begin to reveal to Abraham the judgment that he was going to bring upon the earth, upon Sodom and Gomorrah, very specifically. And so he began to say to Abraham, look, I have heard that the sin in Sodom and Gomorrah is so wicked, and I have come down to see for myself, because the outcry has reached me, and I have come down to see for myself really what's going on there, so that I might discern. And then we see in Genesis 18 this amazing passage where, as God shared what he wanted to do, it drew Abraham into intercessory prayer. In fact, we were sharing with some friends yesterday how sometimes God shares things with us because what he is looking for is that intercessory prayer. He is looking for that person who will stand in the gap. You know, when God exposes things in our families, in our nation, even in our own lives personally, very often he wants a response. He wants some kind of action that we can do something about what we have seen. So Abraham, seeing what God was about to do, he decided, no, I'm gonna do something about this. So he began to intercede, and he said to Abraham, well, supposing you find, he said to God rather, supposing you find 50 people, will you still destroy the nation, the place of Sodom and Gomorrah? And God says, okay, if I find 50, I will not destroy it. And then he said, he took Abraham down to 45, and then down to 40, down to 30, down to 20, right down to 10, where he said to God, if you find 10 people, will you still destroy it? And God said to him, for the sake of your prayer, really, because you have asked, if I find 10 people, I will not destroy it. And we saw how the number 10 is really significant, how even in generations past, how Boaz, when he wanted to marry Ruth, he got together 10 elders who sat at the city gate, the entrance of the city. Back then, in that culture, it might be still today, I don't know, the important decisions to do with the destiny of a village, of a town, even of a peoples, were made at the city gate. It was like the modern day courts. Here in this country, we have courts of law where people go to settle disputes, where they go to have judgment rendered on their lives. Back then, that was done at the city gate. And we'll see its significance in a moment as we look at this next passage. And when Boaz wanted to marry Ruth, he got the elders at the gate. He got 10 of them, which formed the quorum so that they could make that decision. So we saw how that number 10 is significant, that all it needs is for 10 faithful people to come before the Lord and intercede on behalf and agree with him on behalf of the community they're in, on behalf of even maybe the family they're in, and that is all it takes for God to mercifully intervene. So moving on to today's passage, Genesis chapter 19. Let's go straight into it. And it is really God rendering judgment upon Sodom and Gomorrah. The implication in that is obviously he was not able to find 10 people who were righteous in this place called Sodom and Gomorrah. So there is a lot I want to bring out of this. So I will go at speed, at haste. So hopefully you can follow at haste. I'll read it all through first. Genesis chapter 19, and we will stop at verse 29, and then we'll carry on with the next verses next week. But let's go from Genesis chapter 19. So the two angels, they arrived at Sodom in the evening. Remember those three angels that met with Abraham? Abraham laid before them a feast, and then one of the angels departed, and there was just two of them left, because God departed into the heavens, and the two went down into Sodom. And it says in verse 19, the two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening. There's a lot of significance in that I will bring. And Lot was sitting at the gateway of the city. That very statement should make us realize that Lot, even though he was a guest, he'd come from Babylonia and he'd moved into the land. And then, if you remember, there was a separation between Abraham and Lot, where a dispute arose, a quarrel arose between Abraham's servants and Lot's servants because of the resources in the land, and they said, no, there is not enough pasture and watering holes for all our cattle and all our sheep, everything. Let's go our separate ways. And so Lot chose the nice, luscious plains of Sodom and Gomorrah, where the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and Zoar were, and Abraham chose the more barren, the more dry, arid area of Mamre. And despite him choosing that which was dry, he continued to see God's faithfulness in the land that he chose. While Lot, unfortunately, he was lured by the lusciousness, the wealth that there was in Sodom, and he went there and decided to make a living. So it starts off, the very first verse of the chapter says, Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. Not any ordinary person would have that place of being able to sit at the gateway of the city. Anyhow, Lot, when he saw these two men, the two angels who came to Sodom, he got up to meet them, and he bowed down with his face to the ground. Similar to Abraham. Remember, Abraham saw the three? He also bowed down. Lot also recognized, and probably it was something in the generational, something in his spirit, I don't know, something somewhere recognized in him, these two people are not ordinary. So he bowed down with his face to the ground. And then he said, verse 2, my lords, he said, please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night, and then go on your way early in the morning. No, they answered, we will spend the night in the square. But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He, that's Lot, prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, again that's significant, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called Lot. They called to him, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them. Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind them and said, no, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have two daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof. Get out of our way, they replied. This fellow came here as a foreigner, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them. They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness, so that they could not find the door. The two men said to Lot, "Do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against its people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it." So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who were pledged to marry his daughters. He said, "Hurry and get out of this place, because the Lord is about to destroy this city." But his sons-in-law thought he was joking. With the coming of the dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Hurry, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished." Again, I just want to say the timing there is of great importance. In that verse 15, with the coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Hurry, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished." When he, Lot, hesitated, the men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and of his two daughters and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, "Flee for your lives. Don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away." But Lot said to them, "No, my lords, please. Your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me in sparing my life. But I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me and I'll die. Look, here is a town near enough to run to, and it is small. Let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared." He said to him, "Very well, I will grant this request too. I will not overthrow the town you speak of, but flee there quickly, because I cannot do anything until you reach it." That is why the town was called Zoar, which literally means tiny, small place. By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Again, a very significant thing. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities, and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back and she became a pillar of salt. Early in the morning, Abraham got up and returned to the place where he had stood before the Lord. He looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, toward all the land of the plain, and he saw dense smoke rising from the land, like smoke from a furnace. So when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham, and he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot had lived. Father, I pray that you would speak to us, Lord, even as we look at this passage. Reveal your words to us. Help us to understand what you are saying. In Jesus' name, amen. There are a number of things that I would like to bring out of this passage. It is rich in a lot of spiritual understanding and spiritual principles that we can learn and apply in our own lives. I want to start off by saying that the book of Genesis is a very unique book in that there is a verse in Isaiah chapter 41. There is a verse in Isaiah 41 in which God describes himself as being separate from all the gods, all the spiritual deities that human beings worship, all the principalities and powers that are in authority in various places in this world. God separates himself out from all of them in that he says this in Isaiah 41:26. Who told this from the beginning so we could know, or beforehand so we could say, he was right? No one told of this. No one foretold it. No one heard any words from you. I was the first to tell Zion, look, here they are. I gave Jerusalem a messenger of good news. But look, there is no one among the gods to give counsel, no one to give answer when I ask them. See, they are all false. Their deeds amount to nothing, and their images are but wind and confusion. God separates himself, I guess as a creator really. He separates himself from his creation and from all the gods that there are by saying this, that he is the one who told from the beginning what would be. He is the one who declares even to us the things that are yet to come, even from the beginning. In fact, in verse 22, he challenges those idols. He says, tell us, you idols, what is going to happen? Tell us what the former things were, so that we may consider them and know their final outcome. Or declare to us things to come. Tell us what the future holds, so that we may know that you are gods. Do something, whether good or bad, so that we might be dismayed and filled with fear. But you are less than nothing, and your works are utterly worthless. Whoever chooses you is detestable. And it is in that context that God says to him, I am he who spoke from the beginning, so that you could know beforehand and be told in advance what would be. And so the book of Genesis, I want to suggest to you, is very clearly God portraying to all humanity what will be at the very end of the age. And this particular passage encapsulates a picture, it presents to humanity what it will be when God pours out his wrath upon this earth, because the outcry has come to him concerning all the sin and all the wickedness that there is in this earth. It's worth seeing here that the two angels arrived to Sodom in the evening. And it is something I have mentioned before. In the scheme of things, God created day and night, and he did that with a purpose. The Jewish day actually starts in the evening. And we saw how Jesus is the bright and morning star. There's a while back I spoke on this, that Jesus is the bright and morning star, the one who basically speaks of a day that is to come, and then after that star appears, the darkness becomes much darker than it has been before the day finally appears, before the dawn appears. And the reason God created that distinction, that night and day, is really because he was portraying to all humanity the story of creation. There is coming a day when there will be no more darkness, when there will be no more sin on this earth. But the way creation started and the way the Jewish day starts, it actually starts with the evening. So the way creation starts, things go into darkness. And then as they go into darkness, there is this time when sin is given its opportunity and rebelliousness, and evil is given an opportunity. But then in the midst of that, a bright and morning star appears. And then that bright and morning star points the door, points the way towards a new creation, towards a day when creation itself, a new creation will emerge and the old creation will be rolled away. So here, the timings are very significant. That's why I kept mentioning as I was reading the passage. Firstly, the two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting at the gateway of the city. It speaks, I think, prophetically of God appearing through his servants, through angelic beings at the dawn of creation and interacting with humanity, really with a view to saving humanity from the impending wrath that he is about to pour on this earth. Notice one thing, these two angels came and they had just one mission: to save Lot. To save Lot, really. I mean, they had just literally, that was the whole reason they turned up there, was to try and get Lot and his family out. In a way, that is kind of why God sent the prophets, why God sent the patriarchs, why God sent people like Noah, why God sent Jesus, why God sent the apostles. It has just one mission: to save people, to save humanity, to save you and I. He saw us in the world and he knows the impending destruction that is coming, the darkness, the wrath that is coming. And he's like, hey, the judgment has already been proclaimed upon this earth. And really, these two messengers are like God's voice into the earth, really bringing salvation to Lot and his family on account of Abraham. Because Abraham walked blamelessly before God, walked faithfully, rather I should say, before God. Anyhow, we see here, they come to Lot, he's in the gateway of the city, this influential man, and he then bows down and he then says to them, please come to my house. Come, spend the night there. Come, wash, just spend the night there, and then you can go your way early in the morning. Notice how oblivious Lot is to what is coming. And I believe this is a picture of how the church really needs to be told, because there is a vast amount of the church, I believe, that are oblivious to the impending judgment that is coming upon this earth. So Lot is like, Well, wash your house, wash your feet, come spend the night, and then just carry on your merry way, as though life will just carry on. But the angels knew something different. They knew that this city would not be there come the next day. So they then responded to Lot and they said to him, "No." They answered, "We will spend the night in the square." It's a very interesting statement. I was reflecting on this. It's a peculiar thing that the angels didn't want to go to Lot's house. And as I was looking through this, God revealed to me one thing, that there are times he will withhold himself from us, because actually you see what happened when they went to the house, how that then actually made Lot vulnerable. Because of the wickedness around Lot, because of the wickedness in the city, their preference, these two, was that they would spend the night in the square, because obviously they had the ability and the capability with God's power to defend themselves. And so they weren't worried about themselves. They were happy to spend the night in the square. They were okay with that. But they insisted, they were like, "We will stay here in the square." But Lot insisted so strongly, we are told in the passage, that they decided to go with him into the house. This here is another picture of how, and it's not the only example in the Bible, how God can have determined in his heart to do something, but we as human beings can be so persistent and we can be like, "No, this is what I want of you, God. This is desperately what I want." That actually it makes God change his mind. And sometimes God can do that he changes his mind and he goes along with what we want, even though he knows that what we want might make us vulnerable. There are examples of this. You can think, for example, of the king Hezekiah, who was told, "Put your house in order." The word of the Lord came to him when he was ill, and God said to him, "Put your house in order because your time has come, and that's going to be the end of your life." Hezekiah pleaded with God. He got before God. He decided he wouldn't eat. He fasted. He put on sackcloth all night, all day before the temple, pleading with God for his life. And sure enough, the word of the Lord came to Hezekiah the king from Isaiah, and Hezekiah was granted an extension on his life because of his plea, because of his persistence, really. He pleaded with God, and God gave him another 15 years. What happened during those 15 years? A son was born to him by the name of Manasseh. Manasseh would become the wickedest king Judah had ever had. It was at Manasseh's hands that Isaiah was killed. It was at Manasseh's hands that so many of the prophets were killed. And Manasseh himself would end up being taken away, exile, with hook put in his nose because of his wickedness. God pronounced judgment on him. He was such a wicked king, and he went and undid all the good things that Hezekiah, who was a godly king, had done to bring back Judah into that place where they got rid of all their idols and where they decided to follow God. And so it's possible, literally, to so tug at God's heels and say, "I want this," that God actually relents from the thing that he wants, even though it's not necessarily going to be good for us. Here we see how these angels, they wanted to spend the night in the square, probably thinking of Lot's safety. They didn't want to go to his house, because I'm sure they knew if we ended up at his house, this is what happened. And sure enough, as they relented, they went to the house, and Lot prepared a meal for them. And just as I'm sure they anticipated, the men of that city turned up, wanting to have sex with them. What I find really amazing, really. It says, both young and old, they surrounded the house. From the least, as it were, to the oldest, they all came demanding to have sex with these two men. What would have been a gang rape, would have been homosexuality, would have been on so many accounts a completely ungodly thing. Lot went out and tried to reason with them. And he tried to appeal to them, saying, hey, look, I am willing even to give away my 2 daughters so that you can sleep with them, but do nothing to these 2 people, these 2 strangers who have come to stay under my roof. Now, on the one hand, you can stop and think and look and say, what Lot did was crazy. I mean, how would you give away your daughters to be part of something where probably they would end up dead in order that you would save these 2 people's lives? But one thing, as I was studying this, came to my mind that in that culture, they had this thing about the fact that when you take responsibility for a stranger, it is almost like you are supposed to look after that stranger more than you look after your own. In that culture, there was this thing that when you take in a stranger into the home, you're meant to look after them even more than you look after your own children. And so if any harm comes upon you, it was almost like you were opening the door to a curse, because it was seen as such an important thing, that hospitality that you extend to somebody, that it would be an opportunity for blessing to come upon your life. But if in extending that hospitality to somebody, something came upon them, something worse could come upon your life. And so Lot really tried pleading with these men, saying, look, I have these 2 daughters, do with them whatever you want. Now, the honest truth is, what he did was really wicked. It was really, really wrong. And it is a picture, I think, of just how much Lot, who left Abraham and went to stay in Sodom and Gomorrah, how much he had become influenced by what had happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. We will see how Sodom and Gomorrah, as the story unfolds, really had grabbed hold of Lot and his family. Get out of our way, these people insisted. And then they argue, this fellow came here as a foreigner and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them. And they kept bringing pressure on Lot, and they moved forward to break down the door. Friends, I just want to take a moment to describe and explain something about the spirit of the age that we see portrayed in that verse. We see revealed in the scripture its characteristic. That spirit that I would say is behind a lot of what is behind the LGBTQ movement, that spirit that is behind a lot of the sexual perversions that we see in the modern day, in our day and our time, where men are wanting to have sex with men, where women are wanting to lay with women, where all manner of things are being taught to children and to children's friends, to people in schools, that this is totally okay. I want to tell you that the spirit behind it is revealed, is explicitly laid bare in these verses. Firstly, we see that it is a spirit that doesn't care about humanity. It might pretend, it might portray this kind of facade of, oh, this is love, this is whatever. But actually, the spirit behind it has one thing and one thing alone in its mind, and that is destruction. It wants destruction of families, It wants destruction of households. It wants destruction of the individual. We see here that that spirit is seeking out the vulnerable. Notice how they went after these two strangers. They weren't going for Lot. They weren't going for even maybe his family. But they thought, these strangers, they're vulnerable. They're lost. They don't know where they are. Maybe they don't know who they are. And so it went straight, homing in for the vulnerable. Notice how even though Lot pleaded, saying, I'm willing to give my daughters, they were like, no. There was something about that spirit that was targeting these two because the men thought these people were vulnerable. They were strangers in a place. Notice how that spirit as well does not bend or is not willing to subjugate itself or to submit to any laws. If anything, it wants to be the one that creates the laws. Notice how they responded to Lot when Lot began pleading with them. He said, get out of their way. That spirit spoke, I believe, through these people. This fellow came here as a foreigner and now he wants to play the judge. That spirit, that same spirit that is behind the perversions that we see in our day, that spirit that Romans 1 speaks about, where men have exchanged God's image for the wickedness and the darkness that there is in this world, that same spirit doesn't want to subjugate itself to any human laws or any man-made principles. If anything, it wants to be the one that is making the laws. If anything, it wants to be the one that is dictating to humanity what will be. There is a spirit of rebellion. It is a spirit that rejects God's authority. It rejects human appointed authority that we are told in the book of Timothy and in other passages as well, in Romans 13, that all authority has been put there by God for a purpose. And Lot would have been somebody of authority in that town. It wasn't any ordinary person who would be allowed to just sit at the gate where decisions concerning the town were made. And yet that spirit rejected him as a foreigner who wants to play the judge. Notice how that spirit as well is not a respecter of persons. Even though Lot was a judge in that town, he was an elder as it were, it would not listen to him. There is no respect behind it. That spirit has only one thing and one thing in mind: to devour. And it wants to use particularly sexual perversion to devour, because sex actually is a very sacred thing. It is something that God gave humanity as the vehicle through which a spirit being can come into the world. It is a very consecrated thing. Sexual union between a man and a wife within the context of marriage is that means through which procreation, no other heaven or spiritual being has that capacity to procreate other than we as human beings. You possibly say, yes, the animal kingdom does have that capacity to procreate, but what they procreate still doesn't have spirit in it. But we have that ability through that sexual union to bring into existence something with spirit, where God breathes. And so it's a very consecrated thing. It is also a very powerful thing. Paul would say, when writing to the Corinthians, whoever you sleep with, you become one with them. There is a union that happens, that everybody that you've ever slept with, before God sees you as one with that person. That means whatever goes on in their lives, can and will influence your life, and whatever goes on in your life can and will influence their life. But it's not just their lives right now. It means whatever went on in their household, it means whatever went on with their heritage, all the stuff that they bring. For those of us who are in married life, we recognize the fact that when you marry somebody, hopefully you recognize this, that you're not just marrying them, you're marrying, in a way, you're taking them on board together with the household which helped shape who they are, together with even maybe things in generations gone past which helped shape who they are. There are all these things that make a person. And when you become one with that person, that oneness stays through all their life. That's why, as part of the marital vows, it's said, isn't it? Whatever God has put together, let not man separate, let not man divide or bring asunder. This spiritual being is particularly interested in sex, in the sexual act, in perverting it, in changing it into something so that it can use that perversion to bring about spirit beings that are in submission and really in subjugation to it. Through that perversion of the sexual act, its intent is to bring destruction upon humanity. That's its goal. It has one goal and one goal alone. It is destruction upon humanity. So, are there anything else that you can learn about that spirit? Asking those that are here, and asking those, even you, that are listening on the internet as you're reading this passage, is there anything else that you can learn about?
I think also, these men, they must have seen something special in those angels, and they were going really after the men.
Yeah.
Like the seed they were carrying, so they want to destroy that.
Yeah.
Because they were all virgins in the house. They didn't want anything to do that. Virgin God.
Yes, yeah. It's just been brought out for the sake of the video that all these men of Sodom and Gomorrah, they saw something special that was in these two men. And they, despite the fact that they were men and women, they were after the men. They went straight for the men. There's something about that spirit that it is targeting that place of leadership, isn't it? That place of authority. That place of God-appointed authority. And even though there were all these other virgins in that house, it just went straight for those two men. I want to say to you that that spirit is very alive and at work today. We've seen it in our country, in Kenya. In fact, I will post under this video one of our ministers, one of our prominent ministers, speaking vehemently against that spirit, saying it is wrong, it is not good. And what's really sad is there are elements within the church of Christ, because here I believe in many ways Lot is a little bit of a picture of the church, and there are elements of the church that are trying to reason with that spirit, just as Lot was trying to reason with that spirit. Lot was hoping that somehow he could maybe bring them to their senses, I don't know. Maybe satiate their pleasures. Maybe that's what he was thinking. Well, if I give them my daughters, maybe it will be their pleasures satiated. They'll be satisfied. What they got will be satisfied, and that will be it. But that's not what they were after. And the other thing is, you can see how in the church today, there is compromise after compromise. Initially it was, we'll give them this. and then we'll give them this, and then we'll give them this. And it is sadly coming to the point where the church is giving away its precious jewels, its daughters, I believe, willing to give away its daughters because it just wants to satiate, to appease, is probably the word, the God of this age. But that's not what that God is after, interestingly. It is after that male, that godly, that something that these two were carrying. And I wonder whether, as Lot was doing this, he stopped and thought, this is really what I'm doing. I wonder what really drove Lot. And in some ways, you can see the church that is trying to appease this spirit, certainly elements within the church that are. You wonder whether they have ever stopped to think what they're doing. Because this thing will not be reasoned with. I mean, I love the way verse 9 makes it so plain. Get out of our way, they replied. In other words, that spirit is not there to reason. It really just wants what it wants. It is there to get what it wants. There is no reasoning with it. There is no point where you say, okay, if I give it this much, if I say, oh, let's bless gay couples, or let's bless that particular marriage, it will not stop there. That is not what it wants. It is completely pointless trying to reason with this spirit. It is a case of you have to follow what God's word is or not. There is no way you can compromise. So Lot was trying to compromise. He was trying to reason with it to the point where he was willing to give away his daughters. Notice how it says as well in verse 4 that it was before they had gone to bed that the men from Sodom came. I think that's hugely significant. Remember what I said at the beginning about the significance of the day, how the day starts, the Jewish day starts with the evening, and then before they went to bed, that this wicked man descended upon Lot's house. I want to suggest to you that there is a darkness coming, that the night is about to grow much darker. Isaiah, I think it's 61, that says, for behold, darkness covers the earth, even gross darkness, the face of the deep. There is a darkness that is about to come upon this earth, I believe, which is, we're given to a picture here before the people have gone to bed, and that is when they strike, saying, where are those men? And what's fascinating is it's both young and old. In other words, everybody was under the influence of this spirit, literally from the children, which is why you should not be surprised that they're going after teaching things in primary schools. You should not be surprised that they're wanting to indoctrinate children with the perversion that is their delight. These spirits, they're wanting to indoctrinate children so that from a young age, children are being told you can pick whatever gender you want, whatever sex you want. Those perversions come from one place, the pit of hell itself. Anyhow, carrying on, we see that the men kept bringing pressure on Lot, and they must have been pushing him back towards the door, wanting to head to the door to break it down. And I'm guessing, verse 9, at this point, Lot was probably at his door, with the door to his back, pleading with these men. And then we see in verse 10, the men, the angels, they reached out, so they must have opened the door, reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. From then on, from verse 10 on, what we see is where God then presents to Lot and his family the opportunity of salvation. So at this point, they've seen all the wickedness and all the darkness that there is. And from this point, God is beginning to reveal, God will reveal to Lot and his household the opportunity to get out of there, to come out while there is still a chance. It is a little bit like that angel that cries in Revelations, come out of Babylon the Great, because her destruction has been decreed from heaven. So the men, mercifully, really, they pulled Lot in and they struck the men from the youngest to the oldest with the blindness so that they could not find the door. Friends, I want to suggest to you that we are living in an opportunity. There is a moment that we are living in now, prophetically, where darkness has been held back. Because there is an opportunity for people that is being given to people to come to salvation. And notice the salvation, it's a little bit like Paul told the Philippian jailer, it is for you and your family. In other words, God wasn't wanting just to save Lot, but also his family. You know, we just spent some time this morning praying for our families. God is very interested in the whole institute of family. I'm going to be doing a series some time gone, probably after we've done Abraham, at some point in the future, on the importance to God of family. He sees salvation as being not just an individual thing. Actually, when he saves you, he is thinking not just of you, but he is thinking of your family. Because of that tie, that spiritual tie that there already is. Maybe you shared the same womb with that sibling. Maybe they are you've come from them as your parents, they're your parents. Or maybe they are your children, they have come from your womb. For all manner of reasons, there is a very strong spiritual tie that allows God to be able to work such that he can influence the family. We see in the very last verse, indeed, in the last verse of the scripture, where we see it is on account of Abraham that Lot was spared. And so there is right now an opportunity, I believe, where God is holding back the darkness, revealing to us what really is in the darkness in the world, because we saw how at the beginning Lot was oblivious to where he was and the wickedness around him and how much it was even influencing him that he was willing to give away his daughters. He was completely oblivious to all of that. But suddenly in this situation, he sees, gosh, these people are wicked. And so the angels pull him into the house and they begin to reveal to them, they begin really to preach the gospel, as it were, to Lot, if you can put it that way, to give him the way out, to say to him, this is the manner in which you can be saved, you and your family. So they say to him, verse 12, do you have anyone else here? Any sons-in-law, any sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city? The key thing is who belongs to you. One who can identify themselves with you. Is there anyone? Is there anyone? Maybe I want to ask you that question. Is there anyone in your house? Is there anyone in your immediate family who needs to hear this message? To come out of the world, to come out of its ways, so that they can be saved. Because destruction, verse 13, because we are going to destroy this place. This creation has an end life. It has a shelf life. It's something I say quite often. And destruction has been decreed. There is a time coming upon this earth of great darkness, of gross darkness. And God here is saying to you and I, is there anyone who belongs to you? Anyone of your children, of your brothers, of your sisters, maybe of your parents, who belongs to you. And the instruction is simple. Get them out of here. Get them out of here. Get them out of Sodom and Gomorrah. Get them out of this place of wickedness. Get them out of the darkness. We read in verse 14. From here we begin to see really how much Sodom and Gomorrah had so got hold of Lot and his family and the sons-in-law that were with him. Verse 14. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who were pledged to marry his daughters. He said, hurry, get out of this place, because the Lord is about to destroy this city. What was their response? The sons-in-law thought he was joking. What a picture, I think, of the complacent church. The complacent church that has, in a way, come and been joined, in a way, through that matrimony. They've been joined to Christ through that, as it were, that coming into the kingdom, that salvation, as it were, because here we read they were pledged to marry. In fact, some translations say they were already married. They'd already gone through that betrothal process. And in our culture, certainly in African culture, when you go through that betrothal process, it is as good as you are married to that person. And so they were pledged to marry. And it's a picture of the church, really, that complacent church that, yes, has been included in, but actually, and they're being told, get out of this world with all its wickedness, but actually, they're like, you're having a laugh. You're not serious. You're joking, basically. Verse 15, we see the dawn came, which is basically, again here, we see that picture of the day, that the day is about to come, and the angels urged Lot, saying, hurry, take your wife and your 2 daughters. In other words, there is no time to hang about. This is really, really happening. The destruction is coming. God is about to pour out his wrath. No mucking about. Hurry. And I would say that there is a cry gone out to the world, even today, saying, hurry. There is no time left. Hurry, or you will be swept away when the city is punished. What's fascinating, we see in verse 16, just how much the city had got hold of Lot, because it said he hesitated. He hesitated, caught in 2 minds. Should I or should I not? We just read a scripture in James chapter 4 that speaks of double-mindedness, the double-minded person in their heart. That double-mindedness, one mind with God, one mind in the world, and trying to appease both. Lot running out, trying to appease this spirit of the age, but at the same time he's wanting to make a meal, exercise hospitality to these angels, trying to bow down to God. And it causes that hesitation, that double-mindedness. And sadly, there are many in the church, there are many in the kingdom who have been caught in that double-mindedness. Friends, I just want to really suggest this to you. If it is Jesus, it's all for Jesus or nothing. In your life, it's got to be a case of it's all for Jesus or it's nothing. Because if it is Jesus we are serving, Jesus himself said it is impossible to serve God and mammon. It is impossible to serve God and the worldly deities. Either you will forsake one and go after the other, or you will leave one and you'll go after the other. Carrying on. We see how when they hesitated, the men grasped their hands, got hold of Lot's hand, got hold of his wife, got hold of the two daughters and they just pulled them out. They said, you gotta get out. You really have to get out. And I reckon for some of us, literally, it's gonna be like that. We will be saved literally by the skin of our teeth. I pray that will not be you. I pray that you will be found so passionate for Jesus and so alert to the times and the seasons that we are in, and you will consecrate yourself to Him as one betrothed, looking for the day of His return. And because of that, you will forsake everything that there is in this world, all of its lusts, all of its temptations, so that you're ready, eager for the time of your salvation. I pray that we will not have to be those who are grabbed by the hands. God has to literally take us by the hand and to pull us out. Anyway, carrying on, we see again here the angels say to Lot, get up, flee to the mountains, run to the mountains or you'll be swept away. But again, Lot pleading, as ever, pleading, seems to be pleading, always pleading for what he wants. He says, no, my lords, you have shown great kindness by sparing my life. I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me. I mean, God has just rescued you. God has just saved you. And yet you're still afraid of the mountains. That to me doesn't make sense. But clearly this man was gripped so much under fear, probably because of where he was living. And so he said, no, the mountains, I'll be destroyed when I get there. Instead, let me run to this tiny little town. See how small it is. Then my life will be spared. And so he did. As we saw before, because of his constant tugging at God, because of his constant insistence, God said, okay, fine, you can have your way. And so he went to the town and he fled there. God brought destruction upon Sodom and Gomorrah because of their wickedness. God has to stay true to his laws. He will judge the wicked. He cannot deny who he is. He will reward the righteous and he will judge the wicked. There is no compromising with God. There is no reasoning with him. The only point of reasoning is through Jesus, our mediator. If you put your faith in him, if you choose to believe in him, then and then only will you be spared the disaster and the judgment that he has decreed upon this earth. So, as a result, Lot ended up fleeing to this town. He ended up going somewhere where God really didn't want him to go. He wanted him to go to the mountains, but Lot ended up going to the towns. The town actually was not that far away from Sodom and Gomorrah, which is why we see the angels saying, because you're going to be there, I will not destroy it, but flee quickly because I cannot do anything until you reach it. Sadly, we will see how in the future verses what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah, and even in that town that wasn't destroyed. It would have been much better if it had been destroyed, but because Lot chose to stay there, what happened in that town ended up influencing him as well, and influencing what got on in the preceding chapters. So God poured out his judgment, and we see in verse 26 again, Lot's wife, who clearly her heart was obviously still there. Maybe it was a place where it was fun. Maybe it was a place where she enjoyed herself. Maybe where she had this sense of, this is where I belong. She looked back and she too was judged, really. In a sense, even though physically she left the town, her heart was still in the town. And so she faced the same consequence, the same thing as those who were in the town. Early in the morning, we see Abraham, who had interceded. he gets up very early in the morning, so clearly he's troubled by the fact that God was going to bring disaster upon the place, because he was thinking of Lot. And he goes out and he looks towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and sure enough, he sees all the smoke that was there. We read in verse 29, so God destroyed the cities of the plain, but he remembered Abraham, and he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities. This is so very important, and I've said it and I will say it again. God's faithfulness knows no bounds. When you choose to follow Jesus, it has an impact, not just on your life, but even on the lives around you. There is an opportunity for God to bring salvation to them because of your choice. When you choose to walk closely with God, He can do a lot. I'll finish off by just encouraging you to read Numbers chapter 25. We will look at it next time. Numbers chapter 25, we will see how Sodom and Gomorrah really never left Lot and his descendants. In fact, the wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah led to the next verses that we will see what happens with Lot and his daughters. And we will see how out of that incest that there was between Lot and his daughters, so in other words, really there was no morality really, that they were living in that Sodom and Gomorrah, that the city literally ended up becoming his values. His value system got so influenced by what went on in that city that it affected not just him, but generations afterwards. From that incest that occurred between Lot and his daughters, came the tribe of Moab, the people, the Moabites, and we will see how in Numbers chapter 25, they were wicked. And they were wicked particularly in this area of sexual immorality. And they enticed Israel in Numbers 25 to commit sexual immorality with them. And the consequence of that was that the gods that they worshipped, these Moabite people who were descendants of Lot, the god of Baal began being worshipped by Israel. In other words, the enemy used that sexual perversion that was in Sodom and Gomorrah to sow something in Lot that would go down into the generations afterwards, that the result of that would be that Baal would end up being the plague of the Israelites. And in that moment, in Numbers 25, that's the first time we see the Jews, the Israelites, lock, stock and barrel, deciding to worship Baal because of that sexual immorality. From that moment on, Baal would be a thorn in their side, going all the way to Elijah. If you remember when Elijah was wrestling with the prophets, was the prophets of Baal. It all started here in Numbers 25. Father, I pray that in this day and in this time, your church would have their eyes open, that we would quit reasoning with this spirit. We would stop trying to reason with it as Lot was trying to do, and we would save ourselves. We would flee from it. Lord, I pray that you would open the eyes of all of those who are trying to walk two journeys, trying to straddle two sides of a fence in the world and in the kingdom of God. I pray you open their eyes to realize that the only result of that will be destruction. Lord, may we give ourselves over to you wholeheartedly and refrain and denounce everything of sexual impurity. I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.